Here we go. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. The hero's journey monomyth is at the core of stories worldwide among indigenous peoples, the ancients, and our modern society. Before Orion, Finding the Face of the Hero explores a deeper root for this monomyth by looking at how hunter-gatherers viewed themselves within the natural and spiritual worlds through Paleolithic, cave art, and from 40,000 years ago. Biological time author and naturalist Bernie Taylor proposes that select cave paintings are fundamental pieces in the human journey to self-realization. The foundation of written language and a record of biological knowledge are that irrevocably impacted some of the artistic styles, religious practices, and stories that are with us. He addresses a profound archaeological elephant in the room by opening up an uncharted place in our history, which points to the cultural ancestors of mankind. Before Orion will change the idea of who you think you are. Welcome to the show, Bernie Taylor.
Thanks, Matt, for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to get into this. You reached out a little bit ago. I had a look at your work, and it looks deep. And it looks very important. I'm familiar with the hero's journey, but not to the extent that I know you're going to cover today. So do you just want to start with a little bit of your background? And then I know you have a presentation for us. So just how did you get into looking at this and a little bit of your background, and then we'll dive right in.
Well, that's in the presentation because we're going to take the journey together.
Yes, perfect.
So can you see the image now?
You just got to go to screen share. I'll let you know when it pops up.
Hang on.
Perfect. It's loading up. There we go.
Good to go.
We're in.
So we're going to face the elephant in the room, which is really facing ourselves. We're going to take a journey back in time to do this. And there's a concept in your work that we all have common feelings, we have common thoughts, we have common modes of behavior. Well, where does this all come from? And that's what we're going to discover today. We're going to take that journey. We're going to take the journey back to 34,000 years ago at Monte Castillo in the Cantabria region of Spain, this pyramidal style mountain. It's in the north of Spain near Bilbao. At the Monte Castillo, there's the oldest artwork in the world that was recently dated, which is about 66,000 years ago. But we're going to talk about between 34 and 40,000 years ago today. About 6 years ago, a panel called the Panel of Hands in Monte Castillo, in the El Castillo cave, was dated to about 40,000 years ago. It became the oldest artwork of man at the time. And the dating was over a red disc, this red dot on the panel. And people ask the question, well, what does it mean? Is it, is it a period on the end of a sentence? Is it some sort of symbol? And there was really no resolution to what it was. It also didn't make a very good picture. And this isn't a photograph of that area with the red disc. You can kind of see them down to the right. Well, the media around the world ran with the story. We have the oldest cave art of man 40,000 years ago in a Spanish cave. What do we do with it? But they couldn't run this picture because no one was really, jazzed about it. You can kind of look at it and see there's some stenciled hands, there's some dots. But it really, does it capture the imagination to you, Matt?
Not really. Well, I don't know what's going on there.
So the journals Science, Nature, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, everybody had the same impression as you have now. So they ran with a different image from the same cave system. This is called the Gallery of Discs. It was taken by the Spanish photographer Pedro Suarez. Now, isn't that a cool image?
Yeah, it's getting there.
It's getting there. It's much more interesting. And when you look at this panel, what is the first thing that you see?
The red dots.
The red discs. So scientists have spent many years studying those red discs. And this panel is about 10 meters across, okay? The red discs are, 3 to 4 inches in diameter. So scientists have studied this thing. They've analyzed every bit of those red discs. They counted them different ways. And they came up to the conclusion that there's a lot of red discs, but we don't know what it means. Now, take yourself back to 34,000 years ago, and a teacher, a shamanic teacher, takes his apprentice into the cave. He walks in front of this panel, and he asks the apprentice, what does the eye tell you? So I'm asking you right now, Matt, what does the eye tell you?
What is the eye in those discs? Just eye and... I don't know. Are you talking about like an existential eye? Like the eye of me eye, or like in this disc?
Good question. But that's not an answer, is it?
No. No.
So what probably happened was the apprentice did just what you did, okay? He looked at the panel. He started counting the discs. He started, well, what does the eye mean? And what's the relevance of all this? And just as the question I've just asked you. Well, the apprentice probably stared at it just like you're starry-eyed right now and think, God, I basically just failed this test of the apprentice, right? Okay. And he probably looked into the panel more deeply, maybe in tears, and he saw something that he didn't see before. So when you now look into the panel, you're looking at two characters etched into the rock. You have a teacher character, this older man, who's speaking to the ear of a younger boy. So when I ask you, what does the eye tell you? You're seeing the two of those discs are the eyes of the apprentice. And you can see the nose and the slightly open mouth. And then the teacher has this large nose. And you can see his kind of open mouth and his hairline on top with that dark area, with the black.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I are right now in this cave. And I'm the teacher of sort, the shamanic teacher. And I'm asking my apprentice, what do you see? So Matt, now what do you see? What does the eye tell you?
Well, it looks like somebody's learning.
Somebody's learning. Doesn't it sound like that? Yeah. So we're taking a journey. And let's think about this now. We're going back 34,000 years, and we're talking about the same sort of concepts that we have in schools today, and we have in spiritual training, which is your show. A little more shamanic nuance to it. The hairline of the teacher is cut from a juvenile golden eagle. So the golden eagle is standing on his shoulder. Kind of cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like it. Well, when you zoom in, I can see it clearly.
Yeah. And so now we're looking at multiple characters. We have the teacher, we have the apprentice, we have this eagle standing on the shoulder. And this eagle, juvenile eagle has down on its side. It stands about a foot tall. It's probably a June time period. This bird has yet to flown. So we can actually date this scene to June of that 34,000 years ago, to mid-June. Let's go back to our teacher and our apprentice. He's whispering in his ear. He's teaching him something. Maybe he's telling him a story, just as I'm telling you a story today, and to all your viewers. What do you think the story is about, Matt? What could it be about?
Well, if I didn't know the title of the book, I wouldn't know. But I find it fascinating right away that this is 34,000 years.
Mm-hmm. 34,000 years.
That's an extraordinary amount of time.
It's an incredible amount of time.
Yes. So something around possibly spiritual development in the life process.
I would say so. That's the conclusion I came to by the time I finished the book. But that's not where I started. I started by counting the discs, just like everybody else. What Joeseph Campbell said, that there's a hero's journey, a monomyth, a core story that's told around the world. And he said that in the story, there's an individual, an apprentice, that goes on a journey. And on this journey, he goes to a faraway place, and he has magical helpers. And of course, in Star Wars, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. Joeseph Campbell George Lucas studied Joeseph Campbell in the making of writing of Star Wars. And of course, George Lucas is Luke Skywalker. It's mixing up the names. So Joeseph Campbell said that there's this core story, this monomyth, that everybody's fundamentally has the same characteristics. You might substitute a beaver for a horse, or a horse for some other animal character, but fundamentally we have the same story, this journey of going to a faraway place. And on that journey, you go to face yourself. Every time you step into the ring, you're facing yourself. You're fighting your opponent, but you're also fighting your inner fears. How to succeed in the match, you really have to dig deep. You have to find that strength within yourself. No one from the sidelines is going to say, "Hey, Matt, this is it. This is the secret. This is all you need to do." But you have to face yourself. And of course, in the story of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker goes into the cave and Yoda says, "You're not ready to go into the cave." And he says, "What do I need to bring to the cave?" And Yoda says, "The only thing you can bring is yourself." And then Luke Skywalker goes in the cave and he battles with Darth Vader. And he lobs off the head of Darth Vader, and the helmet falls down. He sees his own face. And so really, Luke Skywalker was fighting himself. Okay. And these themes are carried in mythology throughout the world, throughout all time. So that's what Joeseph Campbell came up with. And I was vaguely familiar with Joeseph Campbell when I started this work, and I wasn't really convinced. And Joeseph Campbell would walk into these caves in Europe. He'd say, "It's all myth. It's all metaphor." But he could never actually find the myth or the metaphor, only that there are common patterns in these caves, but no story. Because remember, we're seeing right now, that's Teacher and the Apprentice, is the oldest image of Homo sapiens by at least 12,000 years. And the previous images were small figurines. So we're not seeing any sort of setting. So we're pushing back time, humanity, by tens of thousands of years. Well, Joeseph Campbell drew on the work of the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung. Jung said that this monomyth, or this core, goes back to our primitive self. And Jung had a dream. And in this dream, he walks into an older home. And as he walks down the hallway, the plaster starts coming off. And he recognizes it's not the plaster from the home, but rather plaster from ancient Greece or Rome. So he realizes he's going back in time in his dream. And he continues down this hallway. He walks into a cave. And in the cave, he recognizes that it's a Paleolithic cave from a distant time. And he wakes up from his dream and he starts studying mythology. And mythology from all around the world. And he comes to this idea of this journey of the hero and the monomyth that Joeseph Campbell expounded upon and made it more systematized. And Jung said that in the cave I discovered the remains of a primitive culture. That is the world of the primitive man within myself. Now, we just looked at the Teacher and the Apprentice, and we saw the eagle on his shoulder. We are putting our minds back into the Paleolithic mind because it is still our own. And that's the journey we're going on today. Well, Joeseph Campbell and Jung said that there's archetypes. And the archetypes could be the teacher, the apprentice, could be the old and the young, the hero and the villain, the damsel in distress. But archetypes could also be like a cosmic mountain, like the cosmic egg, the water of transition that we cross to the other side. So it can be many types of archetypes. These archetypes are all within us. And the archetypes are not just people or inorganic objects. They can be animals. So we think of a bull as an archetype, the bull in the room, or the elephant. And the lead mare is the horse, and so on, and the wise owl. Let's go back to this cave. This panel, this gallery of discs, and look more deeply. Can you see the elephant?
I don't know if I clearly see it. I need an outline. I could imagine.
That's right. That's cool. Okay. We're actually going to start with the elephant. We're going to start with an elephant.
Now
you're going to face the elephant in the room. Okay. So when you were looking at that panel of discs before, you always saw the red dots. But now your mind is expanding. You're opening. You're taking the journey. And you're being tested along the way. This elephant has its trunk and its ear raised, as if in distress. And you can kind of see the eye looks a little bit grimacing. It doesn't look happy. Well, this was the first character that I saw on this gallery of discs. And I looked at it and I said, is that an elephant? And right away I started, researching, were there elephants? And there were elephants in Europe at the time, but there were different kind of elephant. The straight-tusked elephant, it has a humped head. It wasn't this is an African elephant. So I reached out to a friend of mine from the distant past. His name is George Schaller. And George is considered the foremost wildlife biologist, field wildlife biologist. And, right away he kind of said, do I really want to do this and so on. And, I bugged him a little bit and we worked on it and we went through all the possible things that this could or couldn't be. And it was, we couldn't determine at that point that it was an African elephant, but we recognized what it wasn't. About a year later, after seeing this elephant, my mind expanded. And back during the 3 or 4 years of this project, I had tremendous spiritual and mental growth. Working on this book changed the way I see the world. We're going to find another elephant. And this elephant has this kind of ear back and trunk down. Does this elephant look familiar to you?
Well, there's lots of references like Ganesha or just like a mother elephant, just a relaxed type.
That's fair. That's fair. And this elephant looks like it's drinking water. You kind of see its tongue out and it's kind of a relaxed mode. But you've actually seen this elephant before, not just in the original panel of discs. It's the same elephant with the raised ear. So it's flipped 90 degrees. So the artist, this Paleolithic artist, captured multiple perspectives within the same elephant. The artist is telling us a story of an elephant that walked down to the water. And in the water, the animal became distressed. Something distressed the animal. And this is a young elephant. So we're challenging your perspective, aren't we? This is sort of like, remember the first Karate Kid movie, and he has his apprentice. To learn karate, he has to clean the floors in the same motion, and then he uses that same motion to become his movements. There's multiple perspectives for the same thing. One thing can be two things. It could actually be more than two. There are more elephants in here, but we're gonna move on. We're gonna go back to this gallery of discs, and we can see the elephants in the room, right? At least you see one of them.
Yeah, I can see them now.
And if you flip your perspective, you can see the downward trunk. There you go. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
So we're taking a spiritual journey now, because what you're doing is you're facing the elephant in the room. You're facing an elephant that you didn't see before, that millions of people in the scientific and popular media did not see when they posted this gallery of this image online. Millions. And we're talking all the major journals, all the major news outlets. It's still up online. You can Google gallery of discs. It's still out there. So we're facing ourselves and what we believe to be as truth. When I first started looking at that gallery of discs, I was looking for a horse. It's a 10-meter panel. The most prolifically depicted animal in Paleolithic art is the horse, and commonly a mare. So I went out looking for a horse. I figured it's got to be something could be hidden in there. Well, I didn't find the horse till 3 years later. Can you imagine that? So I'm finding all kinds of interesting stuff. We find the oldest. We're finding the oldest people by 10,000 years. We find characters of people telling the story. We find the elephant. It's like but I still haven't found my horse. So I'm taking a journey as I'm writing this book, as I'm researching it, as I'm taking all the steps. And we can see this horse is sort of leaping or jumping forwards. You see the raised mane on the back. Well, there's other characters in there too, and I found this one pretty quick. We have call him the masked cosmic man. You can look at his right hand as holding an egg, is raised high holding an egg, and his left hand is against the wall. It's kind of holding himself against the wall. He's wearing a mask. On one side of the mask is a bird beak. On the other side of the mask, you can see his eye. At the bottom of the mask, you can see his mouth. And of course, he's male. He has his left leg is raised. He's right-handed, by the way, because he's holding the egg with his right hand. Can you see that? You can see the raised egg. See the raised hand. I can't hear you.
Oh, I was on mute. I was saying, it looks like from my view, it's the left hand looks like an egg, this like bright thing, but maybe that's.
Oh, so yeah, it's your left, it's his right.
Yes, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, yep,
So,
I gotcha.
So his right hand is raised to hold the egg. So he's a masked man with a bird mask holding an egg, and his left arm that's against the wall to your right has a feathered kind of appearance to it, as if it's a wing. So now we're like in on a scale of 1 to 10 of sane to insanity, 10 being insanity. You're at 10 right now. Just if you told anybody in the world that I saw a masked man holding an egg from 34,000 years ago in a cave in Spain that every major scientific journal has covered, and the popular media as well, they're going to say you're insane.
I get that frequently enough with most of the things I say.
But that's okay. So this journey, just like in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker does meet the insane. Yoda himself is literally, everything he says would be considered insane in our modern world. Okay. Well, he's holding the egg. And my suggestion is that he's holding the cosmic egg, which is a story of creation, a singularity in creation that goes around the world. And in myth, we have it among the Dogon in Africa, the Norse. We have the Vedic people in Indus Valley, the Orphic Greeks, the Chinese. And this is Pengu from the Chinese, which creates the yin and yang sign. And the ancient Egyptians, of course, the Big Bang. The Big Bang is a singularity, just like the cosmic egg. The Big Bang was founded by a Catholic priest, a Belgian priest, Lemanter. Pope Pius XII came out shortly after and said, this proves creation. And if there's a creation, there must be a creator. And then scientists jumped on the idea, and then they thought, well, if there's a creation, therefore there must be maybe it's not a creation, but rather something before the creation. And that's become the continued scientific work. But the original idea was from a Catholic priest. And Einstein said to him, your math is incredible, but your physics are atrocious. But Einstein ultimately did come around to say that this fits in with my own work. And scientists then went on to more popularly come up with the Big Bang, which we commonly accept as how the universe was created. But the idea is within us. Whether or not there is a Big Bang, or there are many other theories about how the universe was created, whether or not there was a Big Bang, we have that archetype, that cosmic egg singularity within ourselves. Are you okay?
I'm with you, man.
You're
loving this.
You're starry-eyed there, Matt. I'm looking here now. And
no, I love it, man. I get to sit back and listen. Just keep laying it on me. I can see the story.
We just passed the 10 of insanity, didn't we?
I think it's all right. Commonly maybe not known, but I think I'm good. I'm loving this.
So we credit Ecclesiastes to Solomon, who has said, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. And perhaps this is not because, it's because we have these archetypes within us. We keep telling the same stories. We have these core elements that are in our being. And that's why things keep repeating themselves. So there weren't cell phones 34,000 years ago and other micro technology, but there were other technologies, spiritual technologies, and psychological technologies that are still within us, that we carry. We remember the horse and we remember the cosmic man. He becomes one with the horse. So he's riding the horse. He becomes the cosmic rider. No, this, you can see the cosmic man behind. And this theme of the cosmic rider is fairly common. Muhammad flew a horse to heaven. Abraham flew, in the Islamic tradition, Abraham flew a horse between his two wives. So many characters. In Greek tradition, Bellerophon rides Pegasus to fight Chimera, the monster. In the Siberian traditions, the shaman rides the horse to the spirit world. It's a fairly common metaphor that's within us, and it goes back to a very deep point in our time. The horse enables the spiritual journey. Now let's look back at kind of what we've learned so far, and maybe go to like 15 on the insanity scale. So here we have the cosmic man in this mask to one side, and you can see his eye, you can see his mouth there in the bottom, and you can see that eagle coming off the side. And we can flip it 90 degrees and we find our teacher. The artist, the teacher with the eagle on his shoulder, the artist created multiple perspectives with that eagle. One to create the mask, and the other to stand on his shoulder. So the shaman, this teacher, transforms himself into the eagle. He becomes an avionoid. So an angel of sorts. Around the world, people dress as birds in their spiritual traditions. It's about as common as water. I believe it goes back to this time. It's how we reach another place. I'm seeing some tears in your eyes right now. Is that what I see?
No, there's no tears, but I could. I've cried before.
Okay.
What's coming up for me is just, I'm going through Robert Grant's Etymology and Number, and that's a full, 10 or 15 scale into insanity as well. He's predicting we're going to get 50 new mathematical constants. But one of the techniques that he shares among all this mathematical madness is to read and write forwards and backwards. So I can't remember who it was, but maybe Da Vinci wrote his journal backwards.
Correct. Mirror writing, yeah.
Yeah, right. So just things like that. So you're flipping and seeing another perspective. So, the core of this is just the ability to see 90 degrees, the ability to see the opposite, the mirror, or, a different perspective. So this is awesome.
Exactly. And what I learned over the years of writing this book was exactly what you just said, is that there's no right or wrong. There's really it's maybe not even shades of gray, but there can be multiple perspectives at the same time. And so the scientists who counted the red discs, they were there. That's what they counted. But there's also more there. There's a forest through the trees. So now we're looking at transformation. We see another spirit. We see a character who puts on a mask. He's kind of walking along. And if you look in the right hand of the original image, you can see he's holding the egg. He's holding the egg. And his left hand, rear hand, has that feathered look to it, as we saw with the cosmic man earlier. So we have other characters in this story. We're kind of moving along here. We're learning about all the things that are possible. If you remember, actually, the previous slide, he was holding the egg in his right hand, as is this masked cosmic man. And we see his left hand of this cosmic man is feathered, which was the same left hand as you saw in the previous slide. So we'll go back. So we can see the back rear hand is that feathered, and the right hand is holding the cosmic egg you can see in the original image.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same rear left hand, that feathered hand. It's different cosmic egg, different egg, but it's the same rear left hand. So our cosmic man is going on a journey. And on this journey, he transforms. Well, we're going to go back to our time and place. We're going to go back to Spain. And we're looking at an indigenous animal there, which is the Iberian lynx. And I tell you what, if I looked in Iberia, I couldn't tell you between a Canadian lynx, Eurasian lynx or Iberian lynx, but George Schaller could. George Schaller, my biologist friend, he's not only one of the most foremost wildlife biologists in the world, he is the foremost big cat person in the world. His life has been spending time in the wild, so-called wild, with the big cats. And during this process of writing the book, I would send him an email, and he said, I'll be back in 2 months. I'm going to be in Afghanistan working on cheaters or something. And he'd get back in 2 months, and he'd respond, and we'd go back and forth, lots of emails, and it's pretty cool. So here we have an Iberian lynx, which is indigenous to what we now call Spain. And if we look in the cave image, we can see this kind of funny-looking chin. What we have is a juvenile lynx, the kitten, is pushing up against the ruff of the mother cat. So our artist has empathy. Our artist is looking at animals as beings and recognizes this touching moment in the image. And when George came back to me, he says Iberian lynx, and then he said to me, it's a touching moment. I'm like, I want to know about the biology of this animal, because that's what I was working on at the time. This was years ago. And going through this and everything that we found in all the caves, he would always go back to the same thing, pointing to the empathy of the animals that he had personally seen in the wild, and that he had recorded in his journal and many, many books. So we have an Iberian lynx. And this would be, again, a summertime scene, very similar to the timing of the juvenile golden eagle. So we're talking mid-June. So the artist is telling us a time and a place, as all stories are told. As we continue down the panel, we have a dolphin. It's a bottlenose dolphin. In the book, I wrote that it was two dolphins. I'm not sure if it's two dolphins or it's spinning, but for sure it's a dolphin. And it's a bottlenose dolphin. Kind of cool. So the artist is, we're traveling to a marine environment. So we've left the horse, and we've left the lynx and the eagle. We're in a marine environment. It's kind of cool. Another animal in that environment is the monk seal. Who's got his head lifted. So we're down. So if we can't say at this point which direction we're traveling, but we've gone to the salt water. And of course, if we have someone traveling to the marine environment, we have to have a swimmer. And it's a guy, trust me. And it's kind of funny, actually interesting. He has a head bobbing up and down. His forward arm is also in movement, and his left hand on top is cupped. He's got that kicking motion with his feet. And for a long time, I saw this image. I didn't recognize that he was swimming. I thought that he was actually climbing, because I only really recognized one head and one arm. So I thought he was climbing. And then I had a flash. I'm going to tell you right now, I had one of those moments, and you know what that moment is, because I've listened to you, and I've seen your smile, and I've seen you glow, and all that sort of stuff. And in that moment, I recognized there was another elephant, and the other elephant's swimming, and then I recognized he's swimming, and then in that same moment, I saw something else. Not this. We're going to catch that next. So here's actually a therianthrope. So we can mix that man with the mask we saw earlier with the dolphin, and we can see the two become one. Kind of cool. And we continue on the panel. We find our hero, and he has a pelt wrapped around his neck. He's holding a club, and the pelt is of some sort of striped spotted animal. Some sort of big cat probably, and it's a guy again, and he's faced in the opposite direction of the cosmic man that we saw earlier on the panel. And you kind of put these two together. The dolphin is pictured lifting up this red-haired man, which you go to SeaWorld, you can sort of see this sort of stuff, right? In ancient mythology, it's all over the place that people interacting with animals, including dolphins. But this concept of us being friends with dolphins goes back a very long time. It's a pretty big dolphin. So I've considered really that it's a spinning dolphin because it's just too big. It's just too big relative to the man. But he's being lifted up by the dolphin. And we can again, he's in a marine environment, and we can and the man is set just above the water. Well, in my moment, that luminous moment that I had, when I saw that the man was swimming, and in seconds I saw this character, the giraffe. I saw one giraffe, and the neck of the giraffe is made from the red disc to give that molted effect. And there's two giraffes, and the second giraffe is a juvenile, which has its neck wrapped around and under the mother's chin. When I saw this giraffe in those seconds in that moment, because everything at that time became like 3D. And for about 3 days, I didn't need glasses. Everything was in complete clarity. And my mind rewired at that time. So when I look at this gallery disc and other cave images, I see it as the cave artist did. Everything just jumps out in 3D. And I saw this and I emailed George and is this giraffe? And he comes back and he confirmed. And I said, I got another giraffe. And of course it was the juvenile, and he was just like ecstatic. And at that point, we came to the recognition that the elephant is in fact an African elephant, because giraffes have only been in Africa during this time period. Maybe millions of years ago, giraffes were someplace else, but during this period, the giraffes were an African animal, just as they are today. But we can see the empathy. We can see the mother protecting the young giraffe, not just by being hidden behind her, but she has her chin over the juvenile. She kind of looks as though she's sleeping or licking him or something like that, licking the juvenile. It's amazing. It's an amazing image. By the way, all these images that we've seen, the lynx, the giraffe, and the eagle, we're going back 30,000 years, actually maybe 25,000 years before any of these sort of things show up anywhere else. So we're looking at the oldest images we have of everything. And when we see these oldest images, we're learning about ourselves. We're seeing that we haven't changed that much in 34,000 years. Maybe we for a long time, we became more afraid of so-called wild animals. But now we've come back to full circle that they're animal beings. And Jane Goodall says that we need to be kind to animals because they make better beings of ourselves. And there's another animal in there, an animal being, which is the Barbary ape. And this one's really cool. And the Barbary ape is now in Gibraltar, on the southern tip of Iberian Peninsula, but they were introduced there a few hundred years ago. They're indigenous to the Atlas Mountains of Western North Africa, Morocco. Okay. And at that time, Morocco the Sahara didn't exist as we know it. It had huge lakes. And so there were rhinoceros and elephants and giraffe roaming around. There's still actually giraffes in the Sahara. But we have this Barbary macaque, and again, if you look at him relative to an actual Barbary ape, the arms and legs are the same way. And I tell you what, I looked at it, I said, it looks kind of like a monkey, I'm not really sure. I sent it to George, right away he knew what it was, because he said it's the only ape that has that big butt, and without a obvious tail. So George knew what it was, like right away. That's pretty cool, our Barbary ape. And again, it actually has a look about it. It's kind of glaring forward. It has a personality. And on that same part of the panel, we have a huge lion. And this is one of the early ones I found, and I pitched to George fairly quickly because he's a big cat guy. And if we look at you can see at the top of the panel, you see the big mane, kind of a big mane flowing off. And you see that nose. And then if you go down, you can see its paws crossed, its front paws crossed, its rear legs are crouched. And I actually didn't see the full body until 2 months or 3 months before actually releasing the book. So when George and we worked on this, we were working on the male lion who's being licked by the female lion with that blocked head. So she's snuzzling up to him, maybe greeting him after he's taking a trip. Maybe she's licking some food off him. But this is an intimate moment. What's interesting about this is that his head's on top. And his head is on top of the panel. So he was recognized as king of the savannah at that time. Now, there were lions in Europe at the time. They had manes. I'm sorry, they did not have manes. None of the other images that are depicted. The African lion is unique to having a mane. And again, we have this empathetic, this touching scene, a relationship between two animal beings. We have a mother bear and her two cubs. Kind of cool. And based on the kind of the configuration of heads, they're probably yearlings. It's etched up there in the top area. And there were bears in Europe and Africa at that time. There are no more bears in North Africa. We have a striped reptile, and the artist uses the dots to create a molted or striped effect. I can't say what kind of reptile it is. There's not enough information. Now here's a kind of a showstopper. We have a woman. Okay, so we're back to human characters. There, as I said, there were figurines of people found in Northern Europe about 24,000 years ago. But now we're looking at something more deeper in time, as well as much more descriptive. And she has red hair. She's nude, of course. She has red hair. It looks like, though it's braided. When you look at her face, what do you see? What's your reaction?
I feel like she's like older. So she seems like an older woman, but it's like serious, like looking, just kind of straight faced.
Yeah, she's grimacing. She's not happy. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we can recognize people from the past with that grimacing look, just as we do today. And when your dog, if you have a dog, or I don't know about cats, but if a dog looks at you, they can also recognize that without the chemical scent. A dog can look at you through the glass and see that you're not happy. So this ability to recognize expressions is something that's within us that goes back to a very deep point in time. Now, I would suggest there's actually an older woman in this one we won't get to, but she's actually younger. And this is the reason how I'm going with it, is she has a stronger chin. And there's another woman, she has a sagging chin, and she has strong cheekbones. And she has full hair. She has, I'm with you on this one, that she is not happy. So we're finding a story of an elephant that was not happy either, right? We have a grimacing woman. We have a boy on his journey. We have a teacher and apprentice. We have the man who's lifted above the surf by a dolphin. We got a pretty good story going on here now. We've all seen the characters in the story before. So we said that the horse was a European animal. That's at the top of this panel, the north, and the giraffe is to the south of the panel. We're going to start at A, which is a northern constellation, Hercules. Hercules is the cosmic man. He transforms into the eagle, which is B, Aegea. C is Lacerta, the lizard. Okay. D is Pegasus, the constellation Pegasus, which is the horse. So the man transforms into the eagle, then transforms or is guided on his journey by the now winged horse. They're transforming into each other, therianthropes. And we hear these Greek stories of the centaur, the man horse. This is where it's coming from. This is a much deeper root. There never were centaurs, but there are cave panels now that we can see that you have a mixture of these human animal beings, that we became one. And we continue down the panel. We have E, which is Pisces, which is a bottlenose dolphin. So you can see Pisces as two fish. They started as a dolphin. F is Cetus, the sea monster. which is the seal. If we kind of, in your mind's eye, you can go back and think about the head, the body of the seal, and you kind of see the tail would be to your left, and kind of the bottom of the lollipop shape. So Cetus becomes the seal, and you can imagine, person, swimming across the Strait of Gibraltar from Spain to Africa, and he encounters in the night this animal that's making all these crazy noises, and he says that it's a sea monster, right? But he calls it a seal. But you can imagine, and the Greeks' interpretation was the Greeks were these constellations are derived. We modernly see them as derived. They came up with the story of the sea monster. Sounds more interesting than a seal. So we go to G is Perseus, the constellation, the hero, and G could be the actually we're going to you put G together with going down below it with H and I. You can kind of see G below the H and I there. H is the head of the elephant. I is the trunk of the elephant, and G Perseus is the body of the elephant. So H is the constellation Aruga, and I is the constellation Taurus. Okay, so between those three, he makes an elephant. Okay, and then so there are constellations that we inherited from the Paleolithic, and the Greeks made up some of their own. They created Taurus into a bull, whereas the Paleolithic artists saw it as the trunk of the elephant. Okay. And you can imagine, you saw those multiple perspectives of the elephant. We can imagine looking up the night sky and seeing him move around, and you'd find that story of the elephant. J is the lynx, which could also be another, it could be the lynx that's in here, or it could be another trunk of the elephant to create that story. So it's kind of cool. So just as we look to the night sky to tell stories today, people did it then. Probably our first stories. Okay. K is Ursa Major, which were the two bears, the two bear cubs, the juvenile bears, and the mother bear on the panel. L is Leo, our lion. So that's the lion, L, in the same spot. M is Gemini, and they use Gemini twice. They use it once for the lioness who licks the lion, and the other one is for the Barbary ape. And the two bright stars in Gemini, Castor and Pollux, become the eyes of the Barbary ape. We continue down to N. We have Orion, our hero. But he's the hero on the southern end of his journey, because we've traveled from Hercules in the north to Orion in the south. So they're the same character, in the same way that Luke Skywalker is the same character when he leaves his home and when he completes his journey in the last movie, after how many movies in between, right? And so it's the same physical form, but we've changed in the process. And on this journey, we've traveled from Spain to Africa. We've stared at the red discs. We've been challenged. We learned about the animals. And all those animals that we found along our terrestrial path were mirrored in the sky above us. So as above, so below in the Hermetic tradition. Do I have a tear in your eye by now?
Not yet.
I tell you,
it could happen.
Okay, I get kind of two responses when people read the book. One is they're in tears. The other one is they get angry. Because the person that cries is the person that's facing the elephant in the room, that we don't know everything. And that there are people in our past that were highly intelligent and had great sensitivity and empathy. And that we carry those traditions on to the future. But the people that get angry, they can't face the elephant in the room, which is what we're doing today. This isn't about Paleolithic cave art. This isn't about Joeseph Campbell or even young. This is about individually, every one of us, looking at what's before us and saying, we don't know everything. I'm not an all-knower. And that there are traditions from our past that we carry on with us through perhaps the collective unconscious, as Jung said, or the mythology, as Joeseph Campbell said. So these myths are passed through the seasons of the night sky as constellations and stars, projecting man's psyche into the cosmos. Characters that are light years from Earth, but still within the grasp of the human imagination. What I believe happened a long, long time ago, and I don't think it was tens of thousands of years ago, not even hundreds of thousands of years ago. I think it was deeper still. That people looked to the night sky and they saw Orion, they saw the man, and they recognized themselves in the night sky as that man. Man projected his psyche into the cosmos. God did not make us in his image. We created gods in our images. So this concept of the being in the sky, in my view, goes back more distant than hundreds of thousands of years ago. And that when we saw that man in the sky, we started to develop our pattern recognition. That we could see things that are beyond ourselves. And we could put our hands up to the sky and we could touch them. And ultimately, as we continued on this journey of looking at the night sky, we found more characters. And we found stories in our real world. We saw the story of the hero as he travels from Hercules in the north to Orion in the south. And we told these stories throughout time. And as people move throughout the world, they continue telling those same stories, or the basic same elements of the stories. And then the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and the Phoenicians and the whole bunch of the people in the ancient world went to these caves, because this isn't the only one that I worked on. They went to these caves and they saw these stories, and they recognized components of the stories with themselves, but they went off in kind of different directions. So Perseus actually became Perseus. They didn't look at Perseus as the body of the elephant. They took that as a person. And they created two stories for Orion and Hercules. But they found that same monomyth, those archetypal characters within ourselves that we still identify with. And the apprentices or the initiates among the ancients probably went into these caves and were asked the same question that I asked you earlier. So Matt, what does your eye tell you?
What does my eye tell me?
What does your eye tell you now?
Oh, well, there's a lot more. There's a lot more that meets the eye on that one.
There's a lot more than meets the eye. Yeah. There are many perspectives, and so we're going to take two scientific slides just for those people who are still in doubt. And there's a concept called precession, that the Earth wobbles on a 25,700 year cycle. And as it wobbles, kind of the horizon over time changes. So stars that someone could see, 10,000 years ago would be different than they saw 20,000 years ago due to the wobble. So they'd see more or less stars. So if this image is really 34,000 years ago, we should be able to see some of those stars, shouldn't we? As a test of precession. So I ran this through a program called Starry Night Pro 7, which is the same one I used with the previous image you saw of the constellations. And so this is 34,000 BCE versus 34,000 years ago. 34,000 years ago is 32,000 BCE. So somewhere between 32 and 34, you had Orion just above the horizon as seen from the Iberian Peninsula, where we had the dolphin lifting the man from the surf. He isn't way up in this. The dolphin can't lift him too high up in the sky, right? Because we see him connected. The dolphins don't fly. Only horses fly, right? When they take on the wings of the eagle. Remember that. That's important. So he's got to be just above the surf. So between 32 and 34,000 years ago, we actually have Orion just above the horizon. 36,000 years ago, these are the highest points that Orion is relative to the horizon. So 36,000 BCE, couldn't have seen the full body of Orion. And 38,000 BCE, kind of, it's touch and go. little wave action, you wouldn't see his foot. So what we're showing is that what this image is demonstrating is that we can actually recreate what we had in the night sky 34,000 years ago, and it matches up. And the image that I showed you previously of side by side the gallery of discs with the constellations was for 34,000 years ago. So it all kind of works, doesn't it? So now we come back to the elephant in the room. We face ourselves, because this isn't really about cave art, as I said. This isn't about elephants. It's about seeing the forest through the trees. And when we look at this, we have to ask ourselves a question. If we're typically single-minded, as most usually are, I mean, it is who we are. I mean, it took me 3 years to find the horse. It took a year to find the second elephant. So I'm not any saint in this process. And every time I saw a new animal being, or a new person, or a new scenario, I'm still seeing scenarios and pieces of the story, I'm like, I get a tear in my eye. I said, when does it end? How many possibilities are there on this panel? And how many possibilities are there in life? So every time I look at this, I'm really to come to face myself. And I'm coming to face not just my individual, but the collective self of who we are as a people and how we see the world. When someone comes out with a press release, they discovered this or that, or, well, I don't believe we were discovering anything. But I believe that most accept them like microelectronics and so on, and medicine. But I believe that these things that we keep rediscovering, these archaeological finds and so on, people, of course, had made them, and other people had rediscovered them. But I believe we keep retelling the same stories through myth and architecture, through our art. And I believe that these are all within us. And so I'm continually faced with myself when I look at this, just as you are, as are your viewers. So Matt, when you now look at this image, what do you see?
Well, I see a lot more of the story. I have an interpretation of it, if that's what you mean. But yeah, there's a lot. And I think that one of the analogies I think of is, you use the cave art as just a piece of information. Two people are looking at it from anywhere around the world, man, woman, old, young, it doesn't matter. And each individual gets their own perspective, and it's correct. Mm-hmm. And as you get more information, you get more story, and that's evolution of awareness, consciousness, and growth.
That's good. I like that. That's how, so I had tremendous growth throughout writing this book. I started off by counting the discs and trying to figure out animals and things like that. But in the end, I wrote a book about psychology and spiritual growth. And the book is not a paleoanthropological work. It's the journey of the hero. And today you saw about 10% of the book. I took some pieces out of it. But it really explores who we are, where we've come from, and what is our possibility forwards. And this is not taking a negative perspective. But this is what I see happening in 3,000 years. This is going to live on. Because it's now on the internet, it's out there, hundreds of thousands of people have seen it. But people saw the same stuff. The ancient Greeks and the Romans and the Phoenicians and the Egyptians and so on. And it became a story, and then became myth. I believe in 3,000 years, people are going to be telling a story of the insane guy from Oregon who's staring at the cave art, and he's in a bout with the ultimate fighter, Belair. And he's challenging him with all these images. And at the end of the fight, Matt realizes that the fight is not with his opponent, but the fight is really his own self-awareness. And there'll be stories like that that are told. I'll probably be taller. I'll probably have more hair or something like that, or and more fit, I'm sure. But this is a story that we've told before that we'll continue to tell. A story that lives on within us all. And I believe that this will become a myth when the caves are closed because, environmental damage, and that people can't see them anymore. Just as the ancient architecture in the Mediterranean has fallen. But this will all be myth, the myth of the hero's journey. And people will have the chance to experience it again. And the work is, you can find more of my images and so on Instagram, Facebook, #Before Orion, Twitter @BernieTaylorOR, YouTube, my channel is BeforeOrion.com with dots spelled out. I use #Before Orion on everything. And I see this as a journey of humanity. I see this as a participatory process. I had my own vision, my own moment, which has influenced the rest of my life. And I hope that people, watch this video once, maybe twice, show their kids, show their family, and have them ask the questions, and to think outside the box, and not just think, but go into the feelings of who we are, because this is not about the counting of the discs. It's about reaching inside yourself and exploring who we really are. Thank you, Matt.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had thoughts the whole time that you're sharing it, and I like that you came to that ultimate kind of spiritual, self-aware conclusion, because that's really what it's about. You came at it from a scientific perspective. You're looking at the oldest. Is this the oldest art known on the planet? Like the oldest, or like up there?
These are the oldest characters we have. It's definitely the oldest human, giraffe, Barbary ape, lynx, everything.
Right. And so your analysis trying to decode this, you go through and you realize it's a story about yourself. You realize that the message is about you and your own progression, and it's about each individual human. So you can go down, I've heard there's, infinite paths to the way home. And that's kind of the story of the cosmic man, or the awakening, or coming above the water. And it seems simple, that it would be your story, and then how you express through life and your own awareness, your own battle, your own elephant. But very few people on the planet are taking that challenge or thinking from that perspective.
Yeah, I feel that. And there, as I say, there's mixed reactions. And the only response that will come back to me that it's not there is, how can it be true if we didn't see it already? So that's not coming to face the elephant in the room. Because this really has, because it's a small minority, but people are afraid that if this is true, what else is true? And what else is false? And it drives deep into us. And that millions of people saw it, including me. I counted the red discs. I mean, I was there. And I took the journey. But it's a journey we could all take. I believe that this will influence, not today and not next year or even 5 years or 10 years, but I believe this will influence education going forwards. Because too many people are now seeing something that's there that was previously not seen. And it's not what we see through our eyes. It's what we find within ourselves.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful. And I think that's important, that with the awareness, with getting through art tells story. I've also heard art is, an energetic portal, and you have this oldest art, and maybe you're not getting the whole message right away, but it's kind of seeding unconsciously. Even when we watch a story, we watch Star Wars, we, view something like this, we view a powerful piece of art. And I apologize, somebody's just decided to cut their lawn. I didn't put a live recording
it's good
button out there. But that's it, man. And I think that the important part is it's your own hero's journey. Joe Rogan does a really great short on the internet about being your own hero's journey, but he didn't invent that. That's one of the oldest stories ever. And so when we start to take responsibility for our own lives, for our own awareness, for our own consciousness, for our own growth, and you hit on some really important points there. Number one is we don't know what's going on, but what we do know is our direct experience. There's so much, it's infinitely more than we don't know. It's not even comparable. You know, for every one thing we know, it's, you know, an infinite number of things that we don't, you know, it's beyond imagination. And so from that perspective of just allowing more growth, more light, more awareness, we're gonna create our own hero's journey, and that's what it's about. And then also there's a seed in there about allowing other people to have their own awareness without trying to force what you're seeing. It's like, I see this elephant. No, I see a monkey. I can't see it. And we battle whether we see the elephant or the monkey, when really, if we listen to that other person, we'll see the monkey too. We'll see the element. And through collaboration together, we will have more awareness.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this is a great session. We need to do something else again.
Yeah, 100%, man. You're always welcome back. I appreciate that presentation and your work. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover? Like, do you want to talk about anything in the book, more theory or some of your discoveries, or do you feel like this was complete? Because I think that presentation was wonderful. And again, I like, you know, a lot of the people out there are very scientific and logical, but if you pursue something to the end, to mastery, whether it's art, music, I don't care what it is. If you go to the mastery level, you're going to come to a spiritual understanding of yourself and the universe. And I think that that's kind of what you've done here, and you're sharing that with people. And I think it's awesome.
Absolutely. That's how I concluded the book. So I finished my hero's journey, and now I'm sharing my story.
Amazing, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Is there anything, so we got your website up there, but is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with before we close?
Yeah, I'd love to do a documentary. So if you know anybody on Disney Road, send them my way.
Well, the message is out there. I don't know anyone personally, but it's out in the ethers now, man. Yeah, it'd be a very fascinating documentary for sure. Well, Bernie, my friend, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing that presentation, and to, you know, continue down your own rabbit hole to, you know, to share the discovery with everybody else. So thank you, brother.
Thank you as well.
Okay. See you, everybody.